Firstly, thank you for making it happen. So let's just go. Let's just go a little bit back to your childhood. Let's start from there, just to give some context to the audience. Just share your story. How did you come to the U.S.?
Yeah. Super short version, and then I'll fill in some of the gaps. Third generation immigrant from Ukraine who ended up living in Ukraine and being born there most of my life, even though I'm a third generation immigrant. And then I came here, joined the Marine Corps from the Naval Academy, was a pilot for a while, public affairs officer afterwards, and then got out into the reserves for a little bit, and now I'm completely out. My transition process was basically became an entrepreneur. I started investing in real estate, and I also built my own education company and a bunch of other companies along the way, many of which I either still have or shut down. Just a big learning process, throughout the years of doing all this. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and now I'm looking forward to really continuing to grow my education company that teaches military how to invest in real estate. That's what ADPI is. It's active duty passive income.
Well, I love the name.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I invest in multifamily, like large apartment complexes and memory care facilities, and plan on scaling that as well.
Awesome, man. So just to give you some context, half the people that listen to this podcast are from the US and the other half are from Asia, different parts of Asia, mostly India, because of course I'm Indian.
Cool. Yeah.
And so, I mean, Americans are pretty well versed with, veterans, and it's a big topic here in general, like going in the military. But for the other side of the audience, that includes me, who has just started now getting more, especially in Texas, because of how much the influence is. Could you give some understanding of what a naval academy is? Let's start with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Navy has an academy. The Army has an academy, which is called West Point. Navy is just Naval Academy. Also, sometimes people call it Annapolis, because Annapolis is the capital of Maryland, and it's such a big part of Annapolis. Like, the academy is the heartbeat of that city. And then the Air Force has an academy called the Air Force Academy. Coast Guard has an academy. The Marine Corps doesn't have an academy. It has the Naval Academy, because the Marine Corps is technically under the Secretary of the Navy. So it's part of the Navy in that regard. So a quarter of the people that graduate academies end up being Marines. So these are all government subsidized. You go for a free ride, and they typically require you to have some sort of STEM education. And for the Naval Academy, West Point, and Air Force, it is required that you become a line officer. Like, you get a job in the military as an officer, right? Not as enlisted, as an officer that quite literally is going to go to the front lines. Well, a line officer means like you do it's not like you're not going to be, at least when I was at the Naval Academy, you weren't going to be an information warfare officer. You weren't going to be an intel officer in the Navy. Like, you had to go on a ship or in a submarine or fly a plane, like kinetic warfare, right? So it was basically they needed the highest caliber people to do the highest caliber requirements in the military. And so that was by design. The academies were created to be very hard to get into, and obviously it's competitive because it's free.
And what's the process there like then?
Back then, it was essentially you do an SAT or an ACT. It's like these standardized tests, and then they also look at your GPA, your scores in school, your grades in school, and then they might have you write an essay, or they want to see what extracurricular activities you did in your life. Like, what other ways forms you as an individual. They had some essays, some questions, but that was it. The Naval Academy approached it very differently. They had all of that, but they also required you to get nominated by somebody that matters in their eyes. So a senator, a congressman, the vice president, even, they can nominate you to. And what that does is it just creates one extra hoop you have to go through. So you have to go get, like, I got interviewed by Congressman Duncan in Tennessee. So you have to go apply to each one of them. So I had 3 people in Tennessee I could apply. There's 2 congressmen and a senator, I believe. I can't remember exactly, that I applied to. all three of them were going to give me nominations, actually, which is kind of rare. But actually, the third ended up not giving me one because he wrote me a letter. He's like, "Hey, I just found out the others gave you a nomination. I don't want to waste it on you because you only need one to go to the next round. And then once you're nominated, you go through like further application. Like it's kind of similar to other colleges, but they really look at you as a well-rounded. They look at you from different angles. That's why, like, I remember one of the interviews I had to sit down with like 10 colonels, retired colonels in a room, and they were just asking me all sorts of questions. And it's funny because at that time, I was actually not wanting to go to the Naval Academy anymore. I was doing it all on a dare. My dad had like this conversation. I'll never forget it. I was in upstate New York visiting my grandpa with my family, and my dad was sitting in the car with me. It was like late at night having the college talk. And he's like, because my dad's a genius. He went to Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute, MIT, and Harvard. Full rides, like just
Wow.
insane. Yeah. So actually, Rensselaer, he paid his own way. He had like 3 jobs, but like Harvard and MIT, full ride. He was as a nuclear engineer. He's the Chernobyl meltdown expert in the world. So
Wow.
yeah. So he told me you can apply to Vanderbilt because I really wanted to go to Vanderbilt. I wanted to party. I wanted to be a frat star. I threw a lot of parties at my grandma's house. I don't know if Spencer's told you that, but I don't know how we didn't get in trouble. We lived 1.2 miles away from our Catholic private high school, and I had like 50 kids at my house at one point after a football game, just getting obliterated.
Your grandma never got to know?
They played they prayed the rosary on the top floor, making sure, hoping I wouldn't get in trouble. Sorry, Baba. But they loved me to death. They treated me like a king. It was too good to be true. I just needed to make good grades and kind of, that was it.
All right. So what are the benefits of going to a naval academy? How does it differ from traditional schooling?
Yeah. And actually, real quick, I feel like I didn't finish that one thought. The reason why I didn't want to go is because, like I said, I wanted to party, but so I actually was just doing it on a dare. My dad was like, "Oh, you could apply to an academy, but you're probably not going to get in." So he knew how to get under my skin, and I was like, I'm going to get in, and I did it, So, but it's different because, you are 100% in the military. You are in a military environment. You go through their own individual boot camps, and you are wearing a uniform every day, right? Like you are getting your room inspected. You are subject to the UCMJ. You're part of the military, right? And that just adds a whole layer of stress, if you will, to a college environment. You're already trying to figure out who you are, who you're going to be when you grow up, and try to learn. But the education is extremely grueling at the Naval Academy, and it's very difficult. It's very high level. I was a I was a double major. I was a computer science, IT, and a minor in Russian. And I mean, it was hell. It was hell. Plus, you're required to do a sport. Period. End of story. You can't not do a sport. You have to pass physical tests all the time. In the summers, you don't get to go party. You have 1 month maybe free. The rest, you're supposed to be training in some way, shape, or form. Like I was on a ship for 11 days off of San Diego.
Oh, so you did this. You went to the Naval Academy as a dare to basically just tell your dad, "Hey, I can do this. I can get in."
No.
Did you have a rebellious nature, or was it just like I want to just prove my dad wrong at that time?
Yeah, and it wasn't like prove him wrong. It was almost playful, but also kind of like, I don't know. I don't know where his mind was at. If you asked him about that night, he probably wouldn't remember it. But he was probably just being frank, like, you might not get in, man. So I was like, I wanted to show. The thing is my SAT scores were not good enough. Straight up. I did well in math, well in writing. My reading was crap. And that's because I grew up in Ukraine until I was 15 and a half. Like it's not that I didn't read well. It's that I was not constantly in an English speaking environment for the first 15 and a half years of my life, which that education through osmosis helps your vocabulary and comprehension tremendously. Right. But they actually cared that I spoke 2 other languages because they knew that was an asset to the military. So my college application was impacted by that positively. So yeah, and I'm sorry, I feel like I sidestepped your question.
No, I think you got to it. It's like it was just it was playful, like more playful. This decision to apply and get it. I was listening to a podcast. I don't remember where, but they were talking like about how a father and a son go through like three different phases in their relationship.
Podcast, but
The first stage when you're super young and a kid, you idolize your father, and then at some point when you start developing your own identity to some extent, you start demonizing your father, and then you go through this process where you understand, empathize where they come from, and then you humanize them. Does
yeah.
that resonate with you, the way your relationship with your dad has been?
It's been a I would say that I've dipped into the, just being very frank, but I don't know if he's going to listen to this. And he knows this. We've had some very tough conversations. He did not, I would say he was in the demonizing phase with his father
Mm.
for 99% of his life. So it didn't move out of that phase until a month or two before my grandpa passed away.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he carried a lot, I think, from that relationship that was very bad. So I think he carried a lot of that. And I think it affected, I don't know, it had knock-on effects that were similar. It was almost like a shockwave. I don't know. It permeated on. It didn't stop with him, and it's probably not going to fully stop with me, to be honest. It's not, it's like a weird, something stays with you a little bit, and I mean, I see it now and it sucks. No matter how much I want to fight it, it's just, but we're in a way better place than him and his dad were. We're actually in a really, I mean, a really good place. But there are moments where I'm like, I really get very angry very fast because I expect a lot from him.
Mm.
I'm held to a very high standard in my life from my family and from my business partners. And so I hold him to a very high standard. So maybe it's not always fair, but I think what's balancing it is it like, there's these moments of maybe demonizing to a degree, but also at the same time, I'm going through some really hard stuff in my life. So I can relate to him and I humanize him at the same time. So it's not just this like abrupt moment. There is a blend there, if you will. And so I think it's more human. Again, we're in a good place, but there are those moments,
Yeah, you tweeted earlier this year, a month ago, I think. Paradoxically, we should all chase imposter syndrome. Our insecurity is the guiding light of growth. Where did this come from?
Huh. Wow. Flattered you're reading my tweets. I'm not very active. So I was preparing to give a talk. So I was doing one of the keynote presentations at my annual conference. This one was in Denver, in front of a bunch of real estate investors, primarily military real estate investors. That's the community I run. And the objective of day one was to give so much value that everybody would be like, okay, this conference is already worth it. And I'm a big believer that, in the age of Instagram and YouTube and books and everything that are so accessible for just a click of a button from Amazon, you can learn the how easily. The how is never the problem. You can learn how to build an engine in your backyard, in your garage easily. But the thing that's not so easy is how do you actually make it succeed versus somebody else who's doing it. I can go buy an apartment complex and somebody else can go buy an apartment complex. Why is mine going to succeed versus somebody else? And this is actually the crux of the premise for our education company, is we don't approach education from like, ooh, what's the logical first step and building blocks there. We approach it from confidence building. So I believe that the biggest dominoes to keep you going is growing your confidence. Because I'd be like if I want to go raise $1 million and somebody else wants to go raise $1 million for the same thing, if I'm more confident coming to investors, guess who's going to get the money? Me.
You.
Right. And so, well, 9 times out of 10. Right. And I think what's crazy is I think most people know what they need to do to become more confident. It's not typically that complex. It's just you hide that part because it's typically work you don't want to do. Right. And so I gave a talk on imposter syndrome because that's a big buzzword these days. And I really dug into a few elements of what the the thing that you need to kind of continue going through, even when you have imposter syndrome, which is really, Gary Vee says that that's just what pansies call insecurity. He's like, just call it what it is. I went through a few different elements that I believe that help the mindset of anybody to know what they need to do to become more confident so that they can actually succeed in whatever it is they're doing. Real estate investing, business building, relationships, whatever. And it was an interesting journey for me, because as I was preparing for this talk for months, you know what they say, the best way to learn something is to teach something.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I approach everything. For me, it's like I have to pretend I'm going to teach it to a child, right?
Mm.
And I had to break it down so simply. And I knew that unless I was without a shadow of a doubt confident in how I was teaching it, I knew I couldn't deliver the speech. I had to know. And so I came to this realization that confidence in yourself doesn't mean you can't be extremely humble in your methods. And in fact, that is the separation of things. To me, people are like, well, you have to be confident, but you also have to be humble. And you're like, okay, that is kind of a paradox. Like, what do you mean? How am I supposed to be confident and humble at the same time? And what's the right balance? And how do I do this? Like, how do I stop myself from becoming an egomaniac, but still constantly grow? And so, in my humble opinion, like, you can and you should become infinitely confident. There's no limit. That's not what makes you an egomaniac. What makes you an egomaniac, like what turns it, what perverts it into you becoming a high ego individual, is if you don't constantly question your methods. You're not constantly questioning, maybe I'm doing this wrong, or maybe I could be doing it better. So it's the jockey, not the horse, right? Trust in yourself. You're the jockey. Be confident in yourself, but constantly question the horse you're riding. Constantly question your methods. And what that does is that makes sure that you're constantly at the right balance of humility as you're becoming more confident, because you're constantly questioning yourself. And now to everybody who's listening, because I got to go Barney style, like I'm a Marine. You got to explain to this simply to me, like, okay, well, how do I question my methods? Like, well, part of that is practice it a million times, right? So like Michael Jordan missed 10,000 shots, but he like made a million shots, right? Just practice. If you're like, I'm not good at sales, do 100 sales calls. Even if it and don't wait to be perfect at it before you do them, just do them, And so one of the ways to question your methods is to just do your methods a lot to see if you can improve them or do it better, or you might find out that you can do something better by just practicing it, right? And asking other people's opinions. There's a million different things you can do. So this is me. Imagine I'm building out my presentation. I have to explain to my community how to become more confident without becoming an asshole, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then they can do whatever they want, right? Because again, I teach real estate. Anybody can teach you real estate, but what's gonna make them succeed? And there's this thing that a lot of life coaches, was a 6-figure slide, as I call it. The Tony Robbins, the Brandon Burchard,
Mm-hmm.
this is called the confidence competence loop. So the more confident you become, the more likely you are to do the next thing and become competent at it. And the more competent you are, the more confident you are. And it's just this loop. And so in order to get into that loop, right, in order to become more competent, is to question your methods, is to practice your methods. And then you do become more confident. And so the perfect balance of humility and confidence is ensured paradoxically through humility. Like, you have to be constantly questioning what you're doing and practicing what you're doing. And that'll keep you humble, but it'll also get you more competent and more confident infinitely.
How, when you don't see the outcomes of your practice, when you're not able to see how this is tangibly improving things, how do you keep on going at it? What is the mindset there?
That is a very good question. So actually, the first podcast I ever did, I answered that same question. And the guy that was interviewing me, he was like, that's the positive mental feedback loop. And so here's what it is. I described to him a moment when I stepped into Calculus 2 at the Naval Academy. First year Naval Academy, I got to skip Calculus 1 because I tested out of it, thank God. And I step into this class, and there's this dude looked like he was from a comic book strip. Like, this guy had like crazy hair on the sides and was just going to town teaching us all sorts of derivatives and stuff. And he would fly through it. And I was like, wait, that was the lesson? And I was just like, wow, this is going to be tough. right? Like, this is nuts. This is a whole new level of education. It's on me now. And what ended up happening is I slept through 90% of the class and still got the second highest grade. And I'm not going to get into like why. I just, I made it happen. But at the end of that class, and I look back and I was like, wow, I had the second highest grade in this class. I remembered where I was mentally when I started, where I was like, holy shit, how am I going to get through this? And I realized people do this all the time, which is we might not use it as a tool, but you can use this as a tool. That look back. So what I did is I remembered a previous moment. So every next thing I did, I would remember, let's say, that calculus class. And I told myself, remember that feeling you had when you finished the class and you had the second highest grade, and you could look back at yourself and remember that you had zero clue how you were going to get to the top of the staircase, right? Like Martin Luther King Jr. says, you don't have to see the top of the staircase to take the first step. Like, I had that moment in the beginning and it was terrifying. And at the end, I felt great. And it was really cool looking back, like, wow, I came all this way. So that imagination, that exercise is something I look back at. Like, so whenever I start something new, I remember back to a time where it was daunting as well. And I knew that I just have to take one step after another. And I'll have that realization like, whoa, I did it, right? And so I would challenge anybody who's worried to look back to any scenario in their life that they had a positive moment like that, and use that as a tool, that visualize it, and know that that's what's going to happen here, as long as you actually put one foot in front of the other.
It seems like you created mental checkpoints, like a library of confidence library, where you've done things before that you didn't think you could do, and just look back at that. That requires some level of gratitude as well, right? Or like gratitude for where you have come to be in that position. How do you go about visualization? Like, is that something you do as a pretty regular practice, or is it only during these moments where you really feel like things are shaky, I don't know where to go or what step to really take?
So for what it's worth, I don't like the term visionary. I feel like it's very gaudy, and I'm like almost like, oh, don't call me that. But my brain really is that I constantly imagine the future, and I constantly imagine things. So it wasn't even something I had to practice almost to think back to something that was successful. It's just how my brain's built. I don't know why. Maybe it's my background. I mean, I had to, move around, make friends. I'm very much a people person. I feel like I joke about sales. I feel like I'm always selling people on me and my mission and where I'm going. Like, I sold my wife on marrying me. Like, I love the game of influencing, not in a negative, manipulative way. That's what's exciting to me. And that's why I feel so blessed that I'm the CEO of an education company. Like, this has been a tremendous ride, and seeing how to not only lead and influence one person, but to influence an organization through a few key people. Like, that's something I'm trying to get better and better at. It's like, how do I influence, employee number 20 through employee number 2, or, you see what I'm saying? And that is an incredibly cool art.
What have you learned there? How do you go about that?
You need to have a really, really, really big mission that matters. I think Elon Musk says this all the time. I'm not comparing myself to him by any means, but like, one of the things that I realized is, well, remember what I said, it's not how, it's who. Right. The way to have the best people rally around your mission is if it freaking matters. If it's a really big mission. Because then people that are ambitious want to be a part of something big. They're going to get bored very fast if it's or disinterested if it's something not inspiring, right? So like, we have a mission of impacting 3 million military families. That is a big mission. If it was anything less, we're literally setting out to change the financial mindset of the entire US military. And I mean, that's not like landing on Mars, but that's our version of it, right? And it's a tall order, but that's a mission that people get excited about, because they went through, especially military people, because they went through the military and they saw what having a low financial EQ does to you, right?
As the person that's starting and building this vision, You need to have your dream should be bigger than the collective dreams of the people within it. I mean, their vision should fit inside your vision. If it's bigger than their vision of what the world could be, then there is a chance at getting them on board because they see a bigger version of their maybe their own mission in some
Yeah, I love
ways.
that. Yeah, I would agree. I have to continue pushing the vision, right? And there's our insurance partner we used to work with. He's awesome. I don't remember where he got this from. It was some book he was telling me he read, but there's something, it's a phrase called like vision leaks. Have you ever heard of like vision casting? Like you have to cast the vision. But if you imagine another time you use the word cast is like you're casting a net to catch fish, right?
Mm.
So, and those nets leak. So you have to keep recasting and recasting
Wow.
and recasting. And I have found that as being one of the most helpful tools. I think, and this is where ego plays in, you cannot have an ego around your vision. You cannot, even if it's an amazing vision, you have to treat it with humility so that you have the humility to continue reminding people of the vision. You can't just be like, oh, we have this awesome vision. Everybody should remember it every single day. You have to keep recasting it because they're going to lose sight when in the daily grind, you know?
Yeah. When I go about this process for myself and getting people on board my own projects, I have faced the shiny object syndrome more times than I can count.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Same.
and I think it comes with this, as you described, like again, not inflating the word visionary, but like when you're thinking of things like at the larger scale, when you're creative, you have this constant need to like find things that could maybe either fit into this or could be bigger or better. When you have faced this, I guess I can put it as lack of focus. How have you navigated that? Just tell us about what have you faced in your own journey when it comes to that focus.
Yeah. I mean, I started an insurance company that I had to shut down, a real estate brokerage that I had to shut down, a Reg A Plus fund that I had to shut down, a mortgage partnership that I had to shut down. I've tried to get my education company to start their own crypto. Like I've been there, done that as far as losing focus. And similar to the positive mental feedback loop, I have a negative mental feedback loop. I see the ramifications, the knock-on effects. The problem is they're very hard to see when things
Mm,
are going well somewhere. Like it
yes.
kind of masks that the insidious loss of focus and what it does until it just hits you. So you're asking what do I do? Well, it's another one of those mental exercises. So you're asking me like, do I visualize stuff? I have to visualize. I don't know if this is gonna make sense. I have to visualize the exercise almost. Let's just say with my education company, I can justify another revenue stream pretty easily. But what it could do is it could broaden our scope, right? It goes outside of our core focus if you're an EOS or traction nerd. And the problem with true visionaries is that your job is to be innovative. Your job
Mm.
is to exercise that muscle that is required. And so it's almost impossible for you to not go outside of the focus. And so to me, it's like similar to like, well, how do you stay confident and humble at the same time? It seems like a paradox. How am I supposed to be a visionary and be innovative for our company, but yet, have handcuffs on? And this is the visual I realized is it's not like, you're not like on a 5-way highlight. It's not a broad thing. It's a deep thing.
Hmm.
So I can get as creative and innovative as I want. There's an unlimited runway, but it's in one singular direction. And that unleashed so much excitement for me because I was getting down. I was like, I can't do my job. Like I'm supposed to be creative and innovative and make big things happen and be the idea person, but
Hmm.
how am I supposed to be the idea person? And what I realized, like, no, I just have to make sure that the lens is very focused and just keep going forward, deeper, deeper, deeper. So, for example, Brian Chesky of Airbnb, he gives an example. And I just heard this the other day and I was like, this is brilliant. 5 stars are now expected, right? It's expected. So he's like, well, here's a mental exercise. What could you do to make it 6 out of 5 stars? Well, maybe you can pick them up at the airport. Well, what if you wanted to make it 7 stars? Well, maybe you pick them up at the airport with a limousine and you hand them their favorite drink and favorite magazine and blah, 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 blah. You're still doing the same thing. You're not outside of your scope. You're still in focus, but you're going deeper and deeper and deeper. And he's like, you can take this to 35 stars if you want.
He brings an elephant. He brings an elephant in there too, I think. 9-star is like,
oh
yeah, the elephant's coming to pick you up. You're coming back on an elephant ride, and
yeah, it's a great example. And so for me, that was very freeing because I was like, okay, I do have unlimited runway. It's
you know, you touched on something very interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, continue on with this thought first.
No, it's just that I do have an unlimited runway, but it's not wide. It's just long. It's deep, and so I can expend all of my creative juices. I can exercise that muscle and grow it as big as I want, but just helping my brain understand it has to be in that one direction, and then believing that that's going to compound and snowball on itself. That's the big thing. Like one little change in an SOP that wouldn't have been created had, let's say, me in this case wasn't thinking about how do I make it 7 stars? How do I make it 7 stars? Might change, might have a knock-on effect to where now an additional 1 out of 5 people are going to word of mouth refer us. And now multiply that by 12 months, multiply that by 24 months. See what I'm saying? So the depth allows compounding. And that's the secret sauce.
Man, you've touched on something very, very powerful, which is that our assumption is that to be innovative, you need to find ways outside of that focus to bring in. But there are so many ways to just change the same thing that you're doing and constantly question those things. I think that assumption is that can't happen with the depth of things. It can only happen with the breadth of it. But you can have breadth within the depth.
Exactly. And that was actually something I've talked to my team about, is I was like, if just my job now is to literally question everything. It keeps us humble, but it also keeps us getting better. And so, and you know, but when you build something in a company, you're like, oh, I'm so proud of this. Guess what? Time to question it. Can we make it better? Don't be offended.
Yeah.
So you got to breed this culture like, no, everything can continue getting better. Our awesome multifamily course can get better. I guarantee it.
Where do you draw your inspiration from for your education company? Like, what are other places or people you look to that are doing it really well when it comes to creating an experience within the education of these military folks?
Recently, I got pretty inspired by Brandon Turner. So he's a big real estate investor. He has his own education in real estate investments. But I would say that most of my inspiration, and if there's a singular individual, also like Alex Hormozy, but not so much with education as like running a course or an education company. I would say and this is how my wife operates with her content. She'll get inspiration from different niches that she then translates into her own niche. And that also allows me to get a little bit like outside of my bubble and kind of relieve the I want to go see what else is out there kind of shiny object stuff. But again, if you keep that lens, you can go chase shiny objects and bring it back into your lane, right? So don't like chase them, but chase finding them and seeing how you can apply it into a different ecosystem, into yours, and get deeper and deeper and deeper into yours.
I wanna talk a little bit about your transition from service to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
How did you successfully transition? I know there's a few people asking about this question. I've been in the military and now I want to go for something different and I want to start a business perhaps. How did you go about that transition? What are some transferable skills, as you're saying, as you're talking about niches and like learning something from something else and applying it to your own niche? How did you do that for entrepreneurship from your military background?
So my military background literally did not help me at all. I was wiggling sticks on an antiquated aircraft. I became a public affairs officer, or Marine Corps called communication strategy and operations, for a while, which it more fit me than it helped me elsewhere. I like talking, I like writing, so it just helped. So I think I fell into it, to be honest, and I say this but it happened way before I knew that this was going to help me with transition. I started trying to figure out how to make more money. And that is because I was dating my now wife, who she's also Ukrainian, but she was studying winemaking in France. And when I was in flight school, I wanted to keep figuring out like, okay, next time I'm going to fly out there, And sometimes it wasn't always France. Sometimes like we met in Milan, Italy, and went to Rome. Then one time we went to Hungary. One time we went to a couple of times to France. Once to Dusseldorf, Germany. Once to Ukraine. These trips were incredible. So I wanted to like go to the best restaurant, stay at the nicest hotel. And so, because I wanted to show her a good time, right? I was selling her on me.
Yes.
And so I learned every credit card hack in the book. I was like, how do I get more points and all this kind of stuff? And it helped me a lot. But then I was like, okay, is it okay if I just learn how to make more money? And so I actually started an app while I was still in flight school, which anyway, long story short, didn't go anywhere because it was an incredible idea and I think it would have gone far, but I didn't have the time or the experience.
What was the idea?
So it's called Who Knew. We actually wanted to call it Small World because, but Who Knew is like, oh, who knew? But it's spelled like HUNU. Because the concept behind it was I traveled a lot in my life. And every single time I was at an airport or in some random city, I would find out later, shoot, my friend was there. I could have grabbed a beer with them. And I was such a social butterfly. I would be mad. I wanted to grab a beer with them and I had no idea. And until I saw a Facebook picture days later, I felt like I missed an opportunity. And some of them were like very like I was like in Germany and I didn't know that I missed a friend. Like it was just right or like it, you know. And so I was like, well, what if there was a way, because I didn't want it to be creepy. What if there's a way to where you could know if somebody that you are friends with is close by without actually seeing them on a map? Right. And so my brother, he's an amazing full stack app developer. He works for, I think it's Golf Plus is the name of the company, the VR headset golf company.
Okay.
I believe he's the chief engineer or CTO there. Like, just incredible programmer, self-taught basically. And I told him, I was like, okay, so I'm imagining like this like sun in a solar system where you're in the middle and the planets are all your friends around you. And it's just proximity of how far they are away. And you can zoom in, zoom out, and you can spin it all, this solar system around. And so this was back in like 2014. He developed this app and you could tap on them and message them. And the idea was that we were actually going to allow companies put their little plans, bubbles where they wanted to as an advertisement. Like McDonald's could be like floating around, you tap on that and be like 20% off, you know what I mean? And I mean, I actually pitched I think at the time it was the CEO of HubSpot on a random call.
Dharmesh or Brian?
I can't remember what it is. Brian. Okay.
Brian. Callaghan.
No, it was Dan Tyre. I don't know.
Okay.
This was a long time ago. 2014. I don't know. Maybe he wasn't the CEO. Maybe he was the CMO. I don't know. But he was one of the top guys there. But basically, I have a friend who her father was an angel investor and he knew all these guys. And so he connected me to him. And at first he was just like, this is ridiculous. And then he kind of like, it clicked. He's like, oh, I see how this would work. It's like nobody was doing it. Like Facebook tried it once, but all they did was they did like a little list in the app of friends nearby. And it was like very gimmicky and terrible. And like nobody was actually doing it in an elegant way like this, where the whole purpose was just your solar system of friends. It wasn't creepy. You could hide yourself if you wanted. You could just message them and that's it. And he then asked me, he's like, so you're going to be able to work on this 24/7? I was like, no, I'm a flight school student. And he's like, bye. Because he knew something that I didn't know at the time. And that's that the tech world is a copycat world. If I started this, and you know this better, like if I started this app, especially the app world, if I started this app, that very next day, a company that has 9-figure funding would recreate it, make it better, and like my first mover's advantage would be non-existent. So we wanted to call it Small World, but then that domain was taken, and I didn't know how trademarking worked at the time, so I had to use Who Knew, which was fine because it was kind of like a, HUNU. That's kind of a fun name anyway.
Then the words.
Yeah, so play on words. Plus, it was spelled interestingly. So, yeah. So it kind of just fizzled out. And that's when I started thinking, okay, like, well, I really need to make more money because, and then I started researching passive income because I was like, I don't have enough time. That's what that Dan Tyre taught me was like, you do not have the time to run a business of that magnitude while you're in the military. And I was like, well, can I make money more passively? So I started researching real estate, or I just researched passive income. And I found Pat Flynn from the Smart Passive Income podcast. Absolutely incredible individual. I met him in DC once. And I started reading his books. He's extremely inspirational. I still remember the 3 podcast episodes, 192, 193, 194, that taught basically how to start an online business from scratch. And then I read 4 Hour Work Week by, Tim Ferriss, and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, and the rest was history. I was like, I'm going to start an online business because I was a computer science IT major, and I'm going to invest in real estate, and that's how I'm going to make money. And nobody else around me did it. They were like, it was just, I almost was worried about talking about it because I didn't want people to know that I was interested in something else outside of the military. I wasn't sure if that was taboo or not. Yeah, long story short, that's kind of
Active duty, passive income. Interviewed Robert Kiyosaki. How's that for you guys?
I
What was
mean,
that
that was,
experience like?
so I didn't get to interview him because I was like, I had a flight that day for something. I think it was 2 of my team members did it. I think it was at the time Michael Foster and then Adam Labar, who was stationed in Japan as an Air Force guy at the time. And I think Robert was in like Hawaii, or maybe he still is in Hawaii. I can't remember. Turns out he's a helicopter gunship pilot in the Marine Corps back in the day. So that was interesting. Just his background is military too. And so he jumped on and they interviewed him. And I think that was just a very surreal moment for the entire team. I think that was one of those moments where we were like, we can get a hold of people,
Can we talk about that? How do you get hold of people that seem out of reach?
Just do things nobody else is doing. One example. So Brandon Turner, very, very big influencer in the real estate space. 13,000 units. Like, I think half of the top real estate books are written by him. Just incredible individual, very humble. And this is just one story. So my co-founder, he's the one who prides himself in relentlessly hunting people down and getting a hold of them. Like, he'll jump into the cockpit of an airplane with our book and like take a picture with people and then like hand them a coin and like just keep following up. Like, he's just that person, right? I couldn't go to a conference for Rod Cleef, multifamily investing, so I gave him my ticket, and he came up to Rod and was like, "Hey, we started a military real estate investing community. Can you please write the foreword to our book?" And Rod was like, "Sure." He'll just do things out of the ordinary. So in this case with Brandon Turner, Eric, my co-founder, he started dropping these breadcrumbs, right? So he knew that his friend Nathan Brooks was good friends with Brandon. And so he would like kind of try to engage conversation that way sometimes. And then Brandon had an opportunity to go meet up with him for X amount of dollars at a little mastermind get together. He paid the money just to go, jujitsu wrestle and talk business with him. And then all these little breadcrumbs for like years, right? And then this conference was coming up, our 3rd annual conference. We were like, we need Brandon Turner at our conference. We want him to speak on stage. And so Eric now had a connection. He was like, "Hey, can you come to our conference?" He's like, the typical and this is, I get it. Like, I would have done the same thing. This isn't love Brandon does, but he's like, "Talk to my executive assistant." Okay. So we talked to the executive assistant, and eventually she's like, "Sorry, he's going to be traveling to Europe on vacation for 2 months," or something like that. It's a complete block of time that is off the table at that time. And Eric calls me and he's like, "Dude, it seems like it's off the table." And I was like, "Nope. I'm not going to take no for an answer." I was like, so I go to our entire team and to a handful of our community members, and I write them a small little script. I was like, "Guys, please say something similar to this in a video and send it to me." So we had like 25 or something people all send a video like, "Hey, this would mean everything to us for the military community. You would be inspirational. Please come to ADPI Con. We can't wait to see you there." And I chopped it up with like all this very patriotic music and this emotional music. And I made this whole video and we just sent it to him. I think a day or 2 goes by and he sends us a video back and he's like, "I'm coming." I think he like canceled a day or 2 of his trip just to fly back, just to make it for that day, because he like, you know what I mean? So here's what I believe. So my dad, I don't know if he remembers this, but he taught me something. Well, he said something that made me, again, I have to formalize it into a lesson. I have to like make a process or a thing out of it. So this was back when I was dating girls. He was like, "Okay, so you can do not enough and it's not going to work out. You can do just the right amount and then you're going to become a friend." You can try just enough and you're going to become a friend. Or you can do too much, you're going to be creepy. Or you can go balls to the wall. You can go crazy. Showing up at their doorstep with flowers every single day, flying out when they don't expect it, writing them poems even though it's cheesy and people are going to make fun of you. Do everything. Basically show them that you don't care that the world is going to think you're nuts, so that they know they're the only person that matters to you. because that gives them, because you know the saying, how you do anything is how you do everything, is that you're going to be that person for them the rest of their life. And it stops being creepy. There's this hockey stick moment where it stops being creepy. And so that's kind of what I started doing. Like with Katya, I went nuts, dude. Like I was like, I'll fly you out to Milan. Like, you know, that was just like, I don't care. You know? And so in these types of situations, I think the lesson is do something absolutely crazy. Make a video. I mean, and this isn't even absolutely crazy, but compared to other people, it is. I think you just have to do something to where it's genuinely, insanely flattering. Right. And one little tactic I heard that I thought was brilliant, and we actually used this on one of the largest social media influencers in the military, was you send them a letter, but not just in an envelope, like FedEx that bad boy, and handwritten, toss in like a memento in there, make it something super personal, like maybe they have a cat and you just give it like a cat treat in there. I don't know. First of all, FedExes, if somebody does have an executive assistant, they're not opening that. That goes straight to the top of the pile, to the boss, right?
Wow.
So if you really want to get a hold of somebody, handwrite, FedEx, and also how we won a couple of contracts for properties was I was literally in uniform on base, took my camera and did a video. It was like, hey, I'm a Ukrainian immigrant, Marine Corps pilot. Me and my team are awesome. We want to buy your property. We are somebody you should sell it to. 2-3 minutes of emotional, this is, and I send it to him. Heck, we closed on one of our houses that people were fighting for just because me and my wife were in the car. We sent a video. Like, you just got to go a little bit crazy.
I mean, this speaks to the exact same thing that you were saying Brian is talking about. It's like, instead of Airbnb's customer, this one person is already used to a 5-star experience, and you are just going out of your way to make it a 7, 9, 10, 12-star experience in some ways to them. And of course, they'll notice. If you do go to the ultimate degree to find ways to connect with them and make them feel important, they will feel that, and they will reciprocate. I have a very similar story, actually. It's like, as a guy that I've been trying to get on this podcast. His name's Sahil Bloom. I don't know if you know about him.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about him because Spencer said you had Sahil Bloom on the podcast. I'm like, what?
Yeah, he's coming. I have been following for more than a year for sure, at least two and a half years. Very early on when he started getting into this space, and he hadn't been selling on anything for the longest time. And I was like, there is going to be a moment where he will do something. And that's his book that's coming out in February. And so as part of this book, he had offered a Zoom call to anyone that buys 10 of these books, pre-orders them. And I was like, dude, $190, $200 for a Zoom call?
With
I was
Sahil
like,
Bloom, like,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm like, dude, what? So I'm like, I didn't even think about it. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna spend these whatever $200. Even before the Zoom call, there was a virtual session with like 20 people on the Zoom call, with him and his one of his partners. I think his name is Matt Schnuck, in one of his mastermind groups that he runs. And I just went ham on the questions. Like, I wanted to make sure that he remembers that I asked him the most interesting questions, but also the most amount of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Right after that, I followed up with him. I'm like, hey, man, been following your journey for a while. He actually talked about imposter syndrome and how he wants this book to be, now obviously still feels that this book won't reach enough people and won't impact enough people. And that's sort of what he's struggling with right now before the launch.
Oh, wow.
And so I kind of talked about my own journey with the podcast. Like, starting the podcast has been imposter syndrome, like overcoming that for me because of putting myself out there, getting people on, asking them deep questions, ask them hard questions. And I kind of just shared that, and I said, like, hey, if you're open to it, let's do a podcast on this topic and others around that. And he's like, yeah, man, like, why not? And I don't think, yeah, man, a lot of these people seem hard to reach, but as you're saying, if you find ways to, if you find ways to put them in the center of your world and make sure that they are feeling that from the genuine curiosity, not just like, oh, it means to an end situation, but genuine curiosity you have for them. Everyone feels that. I think everyone feels that. So very similar story. I told him, like, man, if we're doing this, let's do it in person, not virtually.
Yeah.
It's the best way to do it. So
And
I will
I'll send
definitely.
them.
Last question for you on here.
Yeah.
You've been managing this team outside of where you live at. Most of these people are remote. I got to know like your key executives are not in the same place as you. How do you manage a high performing team that is fully remote? Since we have moved a lot of our workforce remote, people
Yeah.
are struggling with that, I think.
Yeah. Obsessing about tools for communication. So like we have Slack for day to day, and we have ClickUp for project management. Obviously, there's emails and text, but just how you can get very deep on how good your product is, you can also get very deep on how good your communication is. And I think I was battling, like wondering, like, all right, is the team going to think I'm crazy about like requiring this or that? You gotta, like, literally the linchpin to you all working together is how you communicate. So you have to be really good at communicating. And so in a remote world, there are tools to do that better. And it's not, might not be rocket science to most, but if you get better and better at using them, like being intentional about like how you name your Slack channels, to how you connect your other integrations to your Slack channels, or how you use your email or whatever. We also we run on EOS, which is the entrepreneurial operating system. Gino Wickman wrote the book Traction. That helps because it keeps a pulse on our weekly meetings. And I also think one of the biggest things that helps, putting accountability and onus on the team to think through what sort of scorecards or like KPIs they need to perform, like lead metrics, like things they can actually do that will drive the lag metrics, like the results. So it's kind of like, in order for the bicycle to go forward, you have to pedal the pedals, right? So I'm like, if somebody wants 100 sales calls in a month, what are you doing to get those 100 sales calls? Like, okay. Oh, we're running ads. Okay. How much does it cost for, like, what are the actual actions? Or maybe an easier visualization is like, I want to sell, $100,000 of stuff. Okay. So I need to sell 20 at 5,000. Okay. Well, so what's your conversion rate on the sales calls? 20%. Okay. So you're going to need, you know, whatever that is. You need 100 sales calls, right? Okay. So what is the thing you're in control of that's going to drive that? It's kind of like if you want an A in class, you need to, I'm going to study 3 times a week, and I'm going to do all my homework every single night. Okay. Like, those are the things you control. Those are the lead metrics. So making the team accountable to those, I think, helps drive the results, and having that kind of a culture, even because if you're like, I don't care how many hours you work. Are you getting the results? And how do you know how to get those results? Do you know how to think about getting those results?
Focusing on the inputs.
Yeah, inputs. Yeah.
Okay, final question. I saw this tweet of yours too. If you're super passionate, you're probably at least a smidge annoying.
Yeah.
Talk me through this.
I mean, that's like I said, like I just told you, like, maybe I was a little bit worried that my team was going to think I'm annoying with how much communication I want done, or how I want the communication to get done. That's kind of like a worry of mine all the time. I feel like people are going to think, oh my God, like I'm like exhausting. But I think that's just a mark of that's a good thing. It's better to be over passionate than, I can't tell you how many times I've sold somebody on doing something with me because they're on the phone with me. They're like, holy shit, like this guy is like, so yeah, I guess that was just me affirming that that's okay.
What are you super passionate about in this moment?
I love business building, but it's kind of like the 7 layers of why. Like, why I really, 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 really love seeing my loved ones experience things for the first time. It's an absolute drug. Like seeing when my wife immigrated here, like seeing her like see America for the first time, try Chipotle for the first time. Like, I don't know, having my kids go try real Italian bolognese at an Italian hole in the wall restaurant in Florence, and then just doing one of them and be like, I want, or like the first time I put real Parmesan cheese in Florence on their pasta. Like, my kids seeing things for the first time, like I live for that. Like, that just seeing them go through life and seeing new things and learning new things. That is my drug. I love that.
Markian, dude, this has been actually very valuable. I've myself learned a lot, and I think you're very focused on just providing as much value as you can, which I just see it. I just see it in the way you storytell as well, and the things you want to bring out. So I just want to say thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for
absolutely.
joining.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for this was very enjoyable and exciting.
And thank you, Spencer,
Yeah. Thanks,
for
Spence.
connecting us. There we go.
Well, make him listen to this podcast then.
No, he will. He will.
Okay. Awesome.
Awesome. Well, dude,
All
thank
right.
you.
Take care. Bye.
Cheers, man. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.